Hi, Grace. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Joseph Barber. So Dr. Joseph Barber is a Senior Associate Director at Career Service, serving graduate students and postdocs. He has a PhD in animal behaviors from University of Oxford, and he has previously worked as a research fellow at Disney's Animal Kingdom, and currently also teaches graduate students as an adjunct professor at Hunter College. Joseph enjoys thinking critically to help people find and explore different career paths, and is always interested in hearing students and postdocs talk enthusiastically about their research. So in order to get a better experience today, all the questions are welcomed via the chat box. Without further ado, please join me in welcome our speaker today, Dr. Joseph Barber.
Okay, so thank you. I'll make sure I am not muted. I'm not good. So what we're going to do today is run through a whole bunch of resources that I think are going to be very helpful, no matter where you are in sort of the career, job search, career exploration type process, because these are the types of resources that we talk about when we have one-on-one appointments with students at career services that oftentimes people are surprised that we have or haven't heard about or haven't used them to their fullest degree. And so because we're all in this virtual environment together, I think it makes sense to make sure that you are using some of our virtual tools to their greatest capacity, because these are lots of things to process. So, as I think about what a job search process is, it sort of covers a lot of these stages here, right? In terms of, you have to figure out what it is that you want. You have to figure out what skills that you bring to any particular role. You have to figure out what some of your values are as you think about the roles that you're going into, so that the next job that you get or the career that you're starting aligns with your skills, with your interests, and with your values. That's part of the career exploration. Career exploration is looking inwards, but it's also looking outwards. So thinking about where people with skill sets like yours, where they've gone on to, what roles that they've played, how successful they are in sort of leveraging their knowledge and skills to achieve their own personal and professional goals. Networking is actually a key part of career exploration. If you're just doing career exploration by reading things and you're really not engaging in the most effective way in terms of figuring out the next steps that you want to take in terms of career paths moving forward. Some of the things that we're sort of not going to focus on today will be the application and the interviewing side of things. I drew this face now. Look, it's still on my piece of paper. I shouldn't have done that. We want to make sure that you're focusing on right now are going to be the things that's still the interviewing stage, but we do have resources that are connected to those as well. But we're going to start off with these solid first three things here, just to give us a sense of what's going on. So what I'm going to sort of do for the majority of this presentation is I'm going to sort of walk you through some of the ways that you can think about how your career is going to progress, right? So if you think about where you are now as a graduate student, in front of you, there's a whole range of positions that you could go into. And some of you have come into your graduate programs knowing exactly what you want to do next, and you'll continue to do that. Some of you have come into the graduate program, and as part of this process, you figured out that there may be more options that you are less familiar with, that you might be excited by. And it's really up to you to decide which of these paths are going to be the best fit for you. Just because someone says you should be a faculty member or you should go into industry doesn't mean that that's the right choice for you once you've gone through this process. So this is just a sample of some of the roles that people with STEM backgrounds in general go into. Today we'll sort of narrow it down to these sort of two sort of general career fields here. But even within these fields, these are enormous fields. They're giant umbrellas of different types of roles and industry. And as we think about some of the tools that I'm going through, I'm not saying that you have to choose between these or that these are the only choices, but I'm just going to use these as examples, and then you'll be able to sort of decide how valuable that is to sort of you as you're thinking about your own career path moving forward. Obviously, I was spending too much time at home, and I need to get out of the house more, because then I started to think, well, how do you fit into these roles? And then I realized that these both lined up perfectly, and I could stick a U in there and make a graphic, and that's what I spent about 45 minutes doing. So as part of your career exploration, what we're going to sort of focus on first are, what are some of the skills that you do have? These skills because some of these are technical skills and you need these skills to do your research. So those are apparent, but there are more skills than just technical skills. And then the other sort of question is, well, what are the skills that are actually needed in the roles that you'll be applying to? And again, these are beyond just the technical skills. These are the broader competencies that allow you to be effective in a wide range of roles that are out there. And so it's going to be important to understand both what you bring and what they are looking for, they being employers, so that you can really articulate a good match between you and the positions that you might be interested in. So I'm going to start off by sort of walking through from sort of a very sort of smooth entry into this conversation, starting with the career services sort of website, and then go through some of the tools that we often subscribe to so that you can make use of them. So obviously, since we are paying money for them, we want as many students to use them as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of things. I'm going to share my screen, but I'm also going to stop my video so that hopefully the bandwidth can accommodate everything that's going on. So here I am stopping my video, and then I'm going to sort of walk us through some of the resources that are available to you across all of these different platforms. Let's see if I can make this happen. That didn't work. Let's try again. Okay, so hopefully you can see my career services website here. And obviously many of you have been here. I just want to make sure you've touched on some of the key elements that are going to be important for you. So first of all, we break down students into sort of populations. So whether you're a master's student or a PhD student or a postdoc, there are pages there that are going to be more specific to you. So for the PhDs and postdocs, we talk about more faculty roles and positions that include faculty roles, because having a PhD and a postdoc are oftentimes essential for that aspect. We also have communities. So you might find that you're interested in consulting, in finance, or in engineering, and certainly you can look at some of these communities for resources that might be available to you related to whatever field that you're interested in. And then we have this section, the Learn How To, which is kind of what we're going to be talking about today, because we're going to be talking about exploring careers and industries. We're going to be talking about making connections and networking. So if you're looking for more information related to some of these areas, you can take a look at some of these sections and find out, again, some of the resources that are available to you to do these more specific job search processes. So under sort of the exploration tab, which gets its own tab, which means it's obviously that important, there are lots of things that you can sort of pay attention to. So I started off by talking about the importance of self-assessment. So under our self-assessments page, there's a range of tools that you can begin to use. Some of these are free tools. So our Career Explorer tool is a free tool that you can use. Again, we subscribe to this so that you have access to that. Things like the Myers-Briggs and the Strong and StrengthsQuest, these are tools that you can pay money for, but they're not necessarily career-focused tools. They tell you a little bit more about yourself, so what you learn about yourself can be helpful. Those come with a cost, so my suggestion would be to always start with the free tools and work from there. One of the tools that we have is the MyADP tool. It's not specific to Penn. It's a free platform that you can use. And if you go to the MyADP website, you can set up a profile on IDP. IDP in this case stands for Individual Development Plan. And basically what the IDP does, or the MyIDP does, is developed for people in STEM fields interested in the broadest range of career paths that are out there. And it provides, first of all, a self-assessment tool that allows you to look at your skills, interests, and values, and then it compares your scores with the scores relevant to different industries that are out there. So for example, under skills assessment here, I can look at my assessment in terms of how I filled in my response to these questions. Do I have a proficient knowledge of, broad knowledge of science, or deficient? I don't think deficient is the right word, but it sort of says, are you good at it, are you bad at it type things. And so there's a lot of skills here that are relevant to any type of scientific research. Now, it does have a slightly more biomedical feel to it, so you'll see some of that come across, but it doesn't mean that it's not helpful to you to go through this and actually spend some time doing some self-assessment so you can get a sense of what's going on. You can do the same for interests, because interests are some of the things that you want to do in a role. I want to do experiments. I want to write grant proposals. I'm not sure anyone actually wants to write grant proposals, but there you go. Some people might enjoy that. So this gives you an idea about how the things that you want to do might match with some of the roles that are out there. And then equally importantly are sort of values assessments, right? So what is it that's important to you? Do you want to help society? Do you want to help companies make lots of money? Do you want to communicate and engage with the subject of science for a broader audience. You want to communicate it. And so this sort of reflects your, not only your personal values, but you're also your work-life values, right? How do you want to balance your work life moving forward? And from some of you, this may not feel very relevant right now. You're just excited about different types of roles. But for others of you, maybe what happens to your personal life if you have families and children or elderly parents, that's important to you as well. So these are important aspects to bear in mind. And so what I can do with this, once I've gone through this sort of assessment, is I can go to the sort of consider career fit and look at how my answers match some of the common career paths that people in STEM fields commonly take, right? So on the left here, we have our career paths: science education, science policy, science writing, science education. There's a little bit of an overlap there in skill sets that are valuable. And you can see that my skills match for some of these is fairly high, and my interest match is fairly high. And it takes you through the whole process down to things that I really don't want to do, which is apparently research and industry in terms of my interests. But if you click on these percentages, it's actually going to tell you a little bit about the matching between what you say and the industry itself. So how they created this tool is they reached out to experts in these different fields, and they say, how important are these skills or these job functions to the role that you do? And then they took their values that they took from their assessment and are using those to compare to the values that you put in. So if the question is, what skills do I have that match an industry? Here's a great way of answering that. If the question is, what skills are valuable to a particular industry, then here's a sort of an answer to that as well. So the IDP tool, I think, is a great way of beginning to sort of take some time to think about what you do on a day-to-day basis and translate that into skills, to think about what you want to do next, which are your interests associated with that. So again, that came from the self-assessments page on the Career Services website. I'm going to look at one more thing on the Career Services website before we jump over to another tool that I want to focus on, and that will be our outcomes. So we do a career plan survey for all graduating students, and we gather the information that we do collect, and we don't get 100% responses by any means, but the responses that we do get can be as much as 70, 80, 90%, depending on the population. And all of these data then are shared on our website. So we go to the School of Engineering and Applied Science master students. In 2018, we have this survey up right now. You can scroll through this in your own time. You can look at, the number of people who have jobs, who are still seeking, who are going on to further education. We can also look by programs of study. And so, because we are today going to be themed in a robotics way, we can look at where people with a master's in engineering have got jobs from the sort of the general robotics program, or any of the other programs that are out there that you might be part of. And this is just a nice way of seeing the diversity of career paths that are out there. So people working in sort of the finance industry, people working in the aeronautics and the software development, in data science roles, people working in STEM education roles. So I mean, I can't apparently highlight the one on the bottom. So there's always a wide diversity of paths that are out there, and each path is specific to the person that's going on it. They're valuable to each individual differently. But if you were asking the question, what types of roles are out there that are that value the skills that I have, then this is one way of finding answers to that question, right? Because you know now that there are people with your skills in these roles that you can then explore further on, right? So that's the master's one. We also have one for the PhD populations. The master's engineering population and the PhD engineering population are served by different teams at Career Services, so that's why they're sort of split up in that way. But if we go through this, and I'm just going to jump down to the C's page here, we have similar details again for the different programs for PhDs, and what you'll see here is a little few, are more faculty positions out there, more postdoctoral positions, people taking their PhDs and going on down that sort of academic job path that are out there. But you'll also see a lot of industry and government research and other types of research roles that people are going into. So again, this is just information that you can leverage as you're beginning to say to yourself, well, what can I do with the tools that I have, with the skills that I have, with the research that I'm doing? What are the well-traveled paths that are out there that I might be able to follow moving forward? So I encourage you to sort of take advantage of the career plan survey, because we do collect this on a constant basis, it feels like, and eventually when you graduate, you'll get one from us too, and I encourage you to fill it out then as well. So that's our website general overview. I'm happy to pause very quickly now to see if anyone has a quick question about that before I jump into the next tool. So you can just jump in and let me know if anyone does have a question. Otherwise, I'll continue roving forward. So the next tool I want to talk about would be our Vault career guides, right? So on our website, if you go to the search bar at the top, which for a long time we didn't have a search bar, so we're very excited about a simple tool like this. You can find all of our resources by searching through the search bar. Now I pulled this up already because we have a lot of Vault guides that are out there. Oops. And so, stop that. So when we have these subscriptions that we have, we usually put them behind a Penn key subscription sort of area where you'll sign in. You'll see that as I go through some of these tools. But right now you can see here, this is access provided by the University of Pennsylvania. So you have full access to the Vault site. And on the Vault resource, this is a great tool to begin to research companies, to research roles, to research particular industry fields that are out there. So under research companies, I can look for technology companies, and I can get a sense of from the Vault's perspective, what are the top 10 best companies? There are information on these fields that you might take a look at. So if you're trying to use networking to gain access to some of these resources, that's a great way of doing that. There are also these guides, which I'll go into more detail in just a second, but these are great tools to sort of look at some of the job landscape that's out there. So as I expand these guides, you can see that there's a whole bunch that are, in this case, sort of very specifically technology oriented. And as you break open these guides, what they do is they provide a nice overview of some of the roles that are in these positions, some of the training that you need to be successful, some of the trajectories that you have once you're in these organizations, where to look for these opportunities, how much you might be paid for some of these things, the outlook in terms of the future prospects, which for most engineering roles is always a positive outlook, which is great. So these are all great things to take a look at as you are looking on the Vault website, just to give you some of this background information that might be helpful to you as you're exploring careers. So that there are going to be basically 3 steps to exploring careers. There's online research, which is the type of thing that Vault does. There's in-person connections, which is what I'll be talking about as we get to networking. And there's finding a demonstrated way to engage in whatever thing that you're doing. So if you're interested in finance, what have you done on your resume that says that you're interested in finance, right? So what we're talking about today will be the online research and the networking. So this is just part of that online research that's out there. So, under the technology companies, I could look for, Lockheed Martin and get some information about them that might be helpful, just to give me a general overview of what they are and what they do and how they operate. And this is, again, just basic information that can be helpful. And it's just a way of sort of processing some of these organizations that are out there. Under the the best technology companies, I can get a ranking that's out there, again ranked through the Vault sort of data that they have. But it's great to make sure that you're not missing out on organizations that perhaps you're less familiar with, but that might be equally interesting to you based on what's out there. So I highly recommend, if you haven't used the Vault guide, just to sort of spend a little bit of time making sure that you are familiar with the landscape. It's going to be very helpful as you sort of move forward as part of your exploration. Obviously, under advice, there's information on things like networking, on researching different industries that are out there. They even have sort of resume samples that you can take a look at. Again, not necessarily specific to you and your background, but any resume that you can look at can be helpful if you're going into a particular role, because as you look at these resumes, for whatever path it might be, you can see the way that people are describing their skills and the roles that they've had, which can give you an idea about how they talk about those skills. They can give you an idea about which skills are most valuable that you might be able to need to sort of build into your repertoire moving forward, right? So some of these positions are not going to be relevant to you. They may be undergraduate focused, but all information is good information because it can really give you a sense of how people are talking about their skill sets and what skills are valuable as they're describing their particular role moving forward. So again, just another very useful resource because it's freely accessible and can be helpful as well. Now I'm going to jump back, because we're talking about resume samples. I'm going to jump back to the Career Services website and under prepare application materials, we also have a few sample resumes that you're going to find helpful as you are sort of thinking about positioning yourself for roles that are out there. So we have some guides to talk about how to break down your resume, how to format it. And then we have some samples right here at the bottom. If we pick on the master samples as an example, there are a couple here that might be relevant to you as you're trying to position yourself. And so for someone who's had these types of experiences already, where maybe you haven't yet, this is great to sort of get a sense of how this person was projecting themselves, what they were talking about. There's no perfect resume, so you might see a resume and I might see this resume and I still might have feedback for the person who wrote this, and but that's fine, because since there is no perfect, all you're trying to do is identify best practices that you feel comfortable using so that you can sort of integrate that into your own process as well. So that's the Vault Guide. Again, I'm going to pause for a second just to see if anyone has any questions related to the Vault Guide before we jump into the next tool that we have. Fantastic. So on the Career Services website, I'm going to search for CareerShift, which is our next platform that we're going to be looking for. CareerShift is a sort of it's a mixed tool that sort of provides information on companies, on positions, on people that can be very helpful as you're beginning to transition from having knowledge about a company to finding people that you might want to interact with and have questions and ask questions to learn more about the fields, right? So again, CareerShift, we subscribe to this, so you can set up a free account. So you just sign up for this for free. I'm going to log in through my one. And what we see here is sort of, it's broken down into various sections. But first of all, this is actually a good thing to start with. One of the things that CareerShift has right now is a sort of a updated database on which companies are hiring, which companies are having hiring freezes, which companies are pulling offers back. You've probably seen your own databases related to this, somewhere on LinkedIn, somewhere elsewhere. So CareerShift is just adding to that. So we can take a look at this database just to see what's going on. We can do a search. So let's take a look at Boeing. Here we are, Boeing. So we have a hiring freeze, we have layoffs, we have hiring. So again, it's going to be very department specific and team specific and all sorts of other things specific. But it may give you some information as you're looking at the companies that you're currently interested in, whether for summer internships or as you're thinking more towards graduation and the jobs that you're interested in, to see what that looks like. So again, these are just self-reported information. So you'd have to take it and not read too much into it, because you might find that even if someone says that they are having a hiring freeze, that you find departments that are not. Let's try, what we do, Lockheed. So here we are. Lockheed is identified as an essential employee due to the nature of the work that we support. And so what do they have? They have lots of hiring, 4,000 plus openings. So they really do have a lot of hiring. So, for some firms, this is not going to be an issue in terms of the recruiting process. For other firms and some other industries, it's going to be a big deal. So that's just a tool that you can use on CareerShift to get a sense of what's going on. But what I'm going to do first on CareerShift is basically look for companies based on different types of profiles, right? So on the company tab here, I'm going to do a search for companies. And here's where I can do pretty much anything, right? Under the keyword search, I can be unimaginative and type in the word robot, because I like to be very direct. So this is going to give me, the 5,000 companies that mention robot. Now that's not going to be a good keyword, and I can show you why. So we have a list of companies here. Teradyne. The robots? No, wait, that's Cyberdyne. Well, that's lucky, because Teradyne, that would be terrible. So these are all companies where they are mentioning some of these, some of their roles. iRobots there because it's in their name. The Lehigh Valley Hospital, probably because they have robot health, machines there for some of their procedures. The Jesuit High School, maybe they're all robots there. So obviously, the keyword by itself is not going to be, it's not going to hit everything that I want. In other words, there's too much information here. So what I can do up here is I can search by industry. And so you can scroll through this whole process of different industries and pick the ones that sort of reflect your particular focus. I'm going to search for custom software and technical consulting just as an example. So we're going to go from 5,000 plus companies here and narrow it down to a much more manageable, let's see, 169 companies. Some of the same ones pop up, but as I go through some, there may be some different ones. So we have Amazon Robotics. Some of you may be interested in that one. So obviously narrowing the search down is a great way of beginning to sort of focus in on companies that share something similar in common, right? So in this case, perhaps a focus on robotics as a role. So I can save companies, which means that they just get sort of prioritized in my account, so I can find those more easily. I can look at the company contacts, and this is a really helpful tool when you're trying to find someone who you know works at Amazon Robotics, but you can't find their email because remember, LinkedIn doesn't like to give you emails. I don't know where CareerShift pulls their data from, but it can be really helpful because they often give emails. And as you look through this, you know, you can begin to develop a pattern for what the email is. Is it first initial, last name? Is it last name, first initial? Is it first name dot last name? And usually then you can guess other people's. Obviously with Amazon, I see first initial, last name, but I also see last name, first initial. So it's not all consistent. So a tool like this, if you have a reason to reach out to someone, can really help you find a good email address to use. Now, I'm suggesting that you immediately start emailing these people because there's a little bit more work that you'll want to do beforehand, but it's a great tool to begin to focus in on people that you might want to reach out to. I'm going to do another search, so I'm going to keep, I'm going to do company search again. Here we go. So back here. I'm going to keep my robot word, but I'm going to change the industry slightly to electronics. Here we go. I'm going to do a search for this one. In this case, I might be able to sort of narrow it down if I wanted to by geographical location. So if I only wanted organizations in a sort of a geographical area, I could certainly search for Pennsylvania and see if that narrows it down any to sort of a more manageable search area. Let's take a look. So then we have Exin Technologies here. We can take a look at some of their contacts again. And one of the other things that you can do to narrow it down is you can look at school attended, right? So I encourage you to put them in inverted commas to narrow down that search. So now we're just looking at contacts. There's one company in Pennsylvania that has robots as a keyword. And what I see from this is that through CareerShift at any rate, there are two Penn alumni who work here, right? And so again, I have emails for both of them. If I click on Denise's contact information here, I actually get a little bit of information about her background. And more than that, it sort of begins to tell me things that it's found on the internet about Denise, which is really great because this is background information that's just pulled together for you so you don't have to hunt it down. You know, there's articles that she's been mentioned in, things that she's written. It's great. It's a trifle creepy at times because, you know, it's all pulled together without anyone knowing this. If you said to Denise, I found your information on CareerShift, she'd probably have no idea what you're talking about because I don't, you know, it's not a common tool. So CareerShift has this access to this information. You're able then to sort of benefit from it by having a lot more information, more context to the type of positions that these people may be in because you're hearing them in their own words talk about what they're doing or hearing articles about them that give you some perspective for that. So that's a really nice tool to use as you're beginning to identify people who you might want to connect with. That's all I'm going to cover with CareerShift right now. Does anyone have any quick questions on that one before I move on? Perfect. So the next tool I'm going to jump into is LinkedIn. So once you have begun to identify people, LinkedIn is another great tool to sort of gather more information on people. And there's a couple of things that you can obviously do on LinkedIn. One is that you can search for companies, right? So we were just looking at Exin Technologies. Here we go. So you can do a company search. And some of the things that you can do when you do a company search is you can see how many employees that they have on LinkedIn. So they have 42. You can see, you know, the number of people from your company that were hired there. And my company would be the University of Pennsylvania. You can follow them. So once you're following them, it means that anything that they post to their feed gets shunted to your LinkedIn feed, which gives you more information about the company, which gives you more to talk about as you're reaching out to contacts as part of your networking, allows you to, share this stuff and comment on it and just be engaged, which is all great. But perhaps one of the most actually what it also does, when you follow a company or when you're on a company page, is that you can look to see similar pages. So you're basically then crowdsourcing, different types of organizations that match the one that you are looking at, which I think is great, because obviously if I just went to the Exim Technologies website, they wouldn't have a page that said, and some of our competitors and other companies like us are this. So having an opportunity to sort of crowdsource some additional information, I think is great. But probably the best tool here is the people's tool, right? So I'm on the left-hand side in this box, I'm going to click on people, and it's going to show me the breakdown of their organization by their 42 employees. And there are sort of 6 pieces of information that this table provides, which I think are all great, right? So it tells me where they live geographically, which is usually where they work. It's going to tell me where they studied. So unlike CareerShift that gave me 2 Penn alumni, it's telling me that there are actually 15 Penn alumni that have a connection with Exim Technologies in some way. So that's great. It's going to show me the roles that they play in the organization. So engineering obviously is a big one. HR is another one down here. So different types of roles that people might play. Shows me what they're studying. So mechanical engineering, electrical, computer science, all the things that you're studying, what they're skilled at, and how you're connected, right? So I can do pretty much anything. I can slice and dice through these things. I can just pick the Penn people here, bring this number down to 15, and then I can look at those Penn people and take a closer look at their profiles. So again, here we are. Denise, we just talked about on CareerShift. I can take another look at her profile here. Denise is a second degree connection, which means on LinkedIn that I am connected to someone that Denise is connected to, but that we're not connected to each other, right? So in terms of LinkedIn, what that means is that if I click on her contact information, I do not get an email because LinkedIn only gives emails to people who are first degree connections. Now, I shouldn't try to connect with her because right now Denise doesn't know anything about me and doesn't know who I am and anything like that. So connecting with her probably won't necessarily give me a connection because she just might ignore my request. But what I do have is 4 mutual connections here that I can take a look at. So these are the people that I'm connected with as the first degree connections, which means that I have their emails and I can reach out to them. But these 4 people also are connected to Denise, so they have her email. And so if I really wanted to reach out to her, I could go up to one of my contacts and say, hey, Cassie, I see that you know Denise, she works at Exim Technologies. I'd love to reach out to her. Could you introduce me? Could you share an email with me so I can reach out to her? Could I use your name when I'm reaching out? So I could say, hey, Denise, we both know Cassie. She said you'd be a great person to reach out to. And that way, she's much more likely to respond to that than if I just reach out to her randomly and say, hey, I'd love to chat with you. So this is just a great strategy to sort of leverage the social aspect of the networks that you have, right? The more people you have in common, the more likely it is that you can start a conversation. And why do you want to start a conversation? Well, it comes back to the idea of what you're trying to do. As a lot of this is do informational interviews, right? So an informational interview is a process where you find someone who's working at an organization or doing a job that you are interested in doing, and you want to find out more about what that looks like and feels like and how you can be prepared for that. On our website, we have an informational interviewing guide for graduate students that you can sort of download. It's a sort of a nice tool that breaks down the whole process of information interviews in very simple ways. But it's the conversations that you have with people who are alumni, who are doing out there in organizations that you're interested in, these are going to be the most valuable things that you can be doing with your time. You can play around with your resume forever and ever and ever, but it doesn't make it any better until you've engaged with people who can give you insight into the nature of the roles that you're applying to, so that then you can actually adjust your resume moving forward. So the whole purpose of this, of the networking is to be able to gather information that's going to make you a better candidate for when you apply for positions that are out there. So you can do company searches on LinkedIn, but you can also do school searches. So now I'm going to do the University of Pennsylvania school page on LinkedIn. And you can see right here, instead of a people tab, they have an alumni tab, but it's basically the same interactive database, right? So here we have 171,000 Penn alumni and current students, right? So it says alumni, but it's actually current students as well, broken down by the same 6 columns, except for rather than where they studied, it says where they work. So apparently now most people work at Google, right? So this is a really great tool to play around with to gain access to people that you might be interested in. So where they live, where they work, the role that they play in the organization, what they study. So again, you could scroll down, you could click on computer science, or you click on, or type in up here, whatever, major or area that you're interested in. It doesn't map exactly onto your majors or your programs here at Penn, but it gets close enough. We can go just to the secondary connections in terms of how we're connected, but I can also add a skill in, right? So I could put in something like, I know, SolidWorks. SolidWorks in giant capital letters. Here we go. So now we're just narrowing down the 171,000, takes me down to a much more manageable 2,000. As I look at where they work now, again, these are all organizations that you may have an interest in because they use a tool that you are using in the work that you're doing. So it's Amazon Robotics, it's Exim Technologies again. So there's a lot of interaction here. So these 2,000 people, I scroll down, I begin to see people. Here's Denise again. So we are overlapping our searches to get to the same great number of people who can give great insight. If I wanted to, as I said, I can continue to narrow it down so to just the people that I have connections with. So none of these people I'm connected with, these 300, 400 people, do I have connections with, but I always have someone I know who knows them. And so that's going to be much easier for me to sort of break that down and find people that might be a good fit. To, for example, keep the SolidWorks, but type in up here a broad keyword search for professor, which is a fabulous keyword because professors only really have one type of role that you're looking for. So I'm going to narrow this down. We went from 2,000 now to 152. So these are all there now professors who have LinkedIn accounts, who are Penn alumni, who somewhere in their profile talk about SolidWorks. And so if you're interested in a faculty path, these people are just as valuable to be reaching out to say, hey, I see that you're an assistant professor at Oregon State University. I'd love to hear more about what it's been like to establish your own research lab, to, what the funding situation looks like, how that felt, what you wish you'd been prepared to do more of, what I can be preparing to do more of if I'm interested in the faculty track. So again, it's the same process that you're using for people in industry. You should be doing that for people in academia too, looking at the different types of schools that they may be in. So here's Rebecca. I have a mutual contact that I can reach out to her. Obviously, if they're in academia, it's very easy to find their emails. Pretty much anyone who works at a university, you can find an email for them. But again, I can just work through my contact to make that happen as well. So again, once I have a sense that this person has something that they might be able to share with me about their experience that's valuable, I'd want to set up some time to have a conversation with them. So that's sort of a nice way of beginning to sort of gain access to contacts who have something in common with you in terms of a Penn background. If I did want to reach out to a contact and I was having a trouble doing that, so if I had mutual contacts or if I had no mutual contacts, one of the things that I would do is I would find people on LinkedIn, and then I would move over to QuakerNet, which is the Penn alumni database that's organized by Penn Alumni Relations. And so again, you can log into QuakerNet, which is Penn specific. It's not as fancy as LinkedIn, but it gives you actually more information. Here we go again. Gives you more information that LinkedIn doesn't like to give you because it's Penn specific. So if I wanted to, not to pick on Denise any more particular, but if I wanted to do Denise Wong, who's we've been focusing on so far, and search for her in QuakerNet, I can find her profile right here. So she was this one. So I not only have the Penn email address, but I also have her work address, which if I didn't have that before, I now have that. And what you'll find sometimes is that people even have their Gmail addresses there. So it's a great way of finding contact information that doesn't change every time someone changes a particular position. So QuakerNet is a great tool. I mean, we can do a general search for a keyword as well, right? So if I were to type in, if I were to type in robotics here and do a search, so we get about 281 people with robotics in their profile. I can break that down by degree level, by their program, by their school, by their geographical location, by the industry that they work in. And there's even this button down here, search only those who have indicated that they're willing to provide career advice. This is like your lowest hanging fruit, people who have said, yes, I'm happy to help with questions that you might have. So if I search for this with this filter on, I go down from about 281 to 21 people. So these are the people, and I can sort of look through them and potentially find someone who might be, you know, a good fit if I wanted to work at the Jet Propulsion Lab. And Christina was someone I was interested in reaching out to. So again, here's a Gmail address that I can immediately contact her with. She says right down here that she's willing to share her expertise, which is fantastic. I can see a little bit of her background. I can always take her name then and take her back to LinkedIn to make sure she's still at that job, because you may update your QuakerNet profile every now and again, but you're not going to keep it as updated as your LinkedIn profile. So here she is. She's still at the Jet Propulsion Lab. I might find a little bit more information about her by looking at these multiple platforms I'm looking at, so I can see more about the work that she's working on. So if anything there is of interest, that could be part of my outreach message. Hey, I see that you're working on this. Me too. We'd love to hear about what that looks like, you know, from your perspective. So again, this is just a great way of trying to find people who are a good fit for the questions that you might have. So with that, pause a little bit. So if anyone has any questions about that, I have just a couple more things to take a look at before we wrap up. So you can hold your questions to the end, but if anyone has a question, I'm happy to take that now. So since we're back on LinkedIn, another thing that can help you identify the skills that might be relevant for a particular role is actually to look under the jobs function. So again, you could do this by keyword. You could search by an employer. So iRobot is an employer, has the word robot in it. So there we go. So these are jobs now that come from iRobot. There's a senior robotics research scientist. If I click on this particular position here on LinkedIn, and this isn't true for all positions on LinkedIn, but one of the cool things that they have is this how you match box, which is basically something that the recruiter or the talent acquisition manager puts in as they post this position on LinkedIn. And basically what they say is, these are the things that we are particularly interested in for candidates. And what LinkedIn is doing right now, it's comparing these skills with my profile. And I have a PhD, so it says, yes, you have a research doctorate, but then it also says, no, you are a terrible fit for a robotics position. Because that's a benefit there, but none of these things are in my LinkedIn profile. So if I were interested in headhunters finding me or recruiters finding me on LinkedIn, I would want to make sure that these keywords obviously were prominent in my profile. If I were applying for jobs to this type of job using a resume, I would want to make sure that these concepts were integrated into my profile, right? So this is another way of identifying skills that are going to be a good match for the role that I'm applying to. Do I have these skills? Do I need to build these skills? Have I talked about these skills? You could reach out to people who work at these places and you can say, how do you use these skills? What does that look like when you're working on your particular role? So I think that's a really nice way of sort of matching you know, skills, and LinkedIn is sort of doing this for you, so to give you a sense of what's going on. Now I'm going to switch over to a slightly different track. So that was industry. There's one tool that if you're interested in faculty applications that is worth focusing on. So I'm going to do a search for faculty on the Career Services website. And then I'm going to look under resources, because this is a resource. And it's the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. Now this is not something that Career Services subscribes to, but this is actually something that Penn subscribes to, that allows you to have institutional memberships to this tool. And so if you're interested in a faculty role or the faculty career path, you'll want to set up an account with this, a free account with this, because Penn is a subscriber to this. And what it allows you to do is to sort of begin to think about some of the things, the unique aspects of the faculty job search, right? So I can you know, begin to look for resources that might be helpful to me in terms of programs that they have, or workshops that they have, or ways to make sure that I'm keeping up to speed with, you know, getting my research out there. If I'm a graduate student, they have research that's out there in terms of webinars and courses that they take, dissertation success stuff, how to navigate the job market. So Karen Kelsky is the author of the book The Professor is In. She has a blog about that. She's done a 3-part presentation series on navigating the academic job market, from applying to your resumes and materials to the interviewing. All of this information can be great and very helpful as you are applying for faculty positions. So you really want to make the most of your I think they actually have a webinar called Making the Most of Your Membership, right? So if you don't know how to use this platform, then there's a membership, there's a tool right there for you. So again, I want to sort of balance the industry with the faculty side of things, because you still need to do research into the career path of being a faculty member just as much as you need to do it if you're applying for industry, which may seem slightly more removed from if you're a PhD or postdoc. You may be less familiar with that pathway than you are with the academic one, but it's worth exploring both of those together. Which then takes me to my final resource of the day, and then I'm happy to take any questions that you have. You all have Handshake accounts, and hopefully you've been using Handshake accounts to schedule appointments with career services. So once you're on your Handshake account, you get to your homepage, you click on the Career Center, and you can schedule appointments when it loads by using the appointment scheduler here. So different teams, as I said, there are 2 teams that serve engineering students at career services, one that serves undergrad and masters, one that serves PhDs and postdocs. You can it'll be set up for you to find the right person. All of the teams do daily phone drop-ins on weekdays at certain times of the day, so you can look for those appointments on Handshake too. Those are 15-minute appointments, just like the walk-ins that we used to have when we had offices, but you can do phone-in walk-in appointments, or do the 30-minute appointments that you might go through a resume or talk about your strategy moving forward. But there's one other aspect that I think is sort of an undervalued aspect sometimes on Handshake. Handshake is also a community system, a sort of platform. So if you click on community here, it's actually going to show you all of the students from all the schools that Handshake is used at, which is an enormous number of students, far too many students to be helpful. So I can narrow it down if I wanted to and just click on University of Pennsylvania only, which is obviously going to be much more manageable. I can then go through and select the populations that I might be interested in: masters, alumni, doctorate, postdoc. And you can see how many of these people come from the Penn Handshake pool. I can then narrow it down by a career field that I might be interested in, or a sort of a discipline rather. If I wanted to do electrical engineering, computer science, just as examples, so we can see the number of people here. And then some of the things that I can glean from this can be some of the people who have had internships or even former positions at these organizations that I might be interested in. I might be able to find these people just by looking through their profiles, and I can say, hey, I see someone who's had an internship or has a role at Amazon. I can connect them through this way. I can message them directly through Handshake. If someone's had an internship already at an organization that you are looking for an internship at, you can learn more about the nature of that internship. You can learn about how they applied. You can learn about how they, the interviewing process that they went through. So there's lots that can be sort of gleaned just by looking at what people say in their sort of Handshake profile about where they work, the internships that they have, or the companies that they're currently at now if they've already graduated. So as I said, you can message directly through Handshake, or you could just probably bump into them in the hallway if we ever do bump into each other again, so you can have a conversation with them. And some of these people you may know directly. Some of these people may be in labs that you just don't have any reason to interact with otherwise. So taking advantage of people who are at Penn, who share that current student status with you, who might just be down the hallway if we had hallways. This is a great way of starting a conversation where you might learn something about the opportunities in front of you. So do take advantage of Handshake as a way to sort of really leverage the skills and the knowledge and the expertise already at Penn. That is all that I have to share in terms of resources, and I know I've gone through that at speed, which is great that you've recorded it so that you can take advantage of that moving forward. But if anyone has any questions right now, I'm happy to answer those. Otherwise, my suggestion would be to obviously to play around with these, and as you do have questions, to come and schedule appointments with us at Career Services so that we can begin to help you answer those. Hopefully you're all still there. Well, if there are no questions, I'm happy to have you head out for your rest of your day. I'm happy to stick around for a little bit longer if you do have questions, but otherwise, please do connect with us at Career Services.